Hello and welcome to another edition of Talks with Gio and Vern, and I'm super excited to get a chance to connect with Gio's heart and ask her really what it takes to create freedom in a man. She's gotten a chance to work with a lot of men and women and see firsthand what it takes for a man to stop fearing that loss of freedom that most men feel. And basically my goal for today is to ask you questions to get a chance to tap into your heart and your brain and see for all the women who are watching how they can replicate this emotion of freedom, which is what most men yearn for in their hearts, in a deeper way than they can during their own playing Nintendo with their guy friends, right? So my first question to you is, what is freedom for a man? And what is the fear of losing freedom for a man?
That's a great question, Vern, and I think the first place that I'd like to start that is by saying that for women, oftentimes our highest value is safety and security. This is why so many of us women have this kind of primal need to have commitment or to know where we stand in a relationship, to have a home, to have a guy, you know, show up as a provider and a protector, and in a very primal sense. And so, but for a man, the man who has that burden of kind of going out into the world traditionally, right? I mean, things have changed, but his highest value is freedom. So he understands that when he makes a commitment, he's really making that commitment to show up as the man, and that entails a lot of different things. So I think because a man's highest value, and I think you would agree with me, is freedom, if he can find a woman who can give him a deep experience of emotional freedom, then that's, I mean, where he feels fully seen and he feels fully accepted, versus the woman, you know, seeing him as someone to fill a role, seeing him as a boyfriend before she ever even really sees who he is apart from her, then that for a man sets him free. When a man doesn't have to hide, Vern.
Okay. So I will add to that part of that searching for freedom is that the masculine essence is basically trying to break free from constraints.
Yes.
Like challenge is basically I'm not free and I'm going to solve that challenge. Football games the same thing. There's like I have like this whether it's soccer or football, like this little thing has to go right there and I'm going to face all these obstacles. And when I can face all the obstacles and I can break free from them, I'm free.
Yes, exactly.
So his primal need is to feel like he has the ability to continue expanding in that sense and not feel like he's going to stop growing and stop, his soul is going to stop expanding.
Start constricting.
Exactly.
Yeah, and in relationships, so often, because we're so afraid of losing the other person, we become very constricting. And we start trying to control the relationship, or we hide, or we don't say how we really feel because at least I still have him. You know what I mean? And that right there will start to become so constricting to the soul. And so as women, generally we are the leaders in kind of the emotional realm and in kind of the inner world. And so if we can give a man a deep experience of emotional freedom where he can break free, you know, he doesn't have to hide, he doesn't have to hide the parts of himself that are animalistic and primal. He doesn't have to hide the parts of him that are in his ego. He doesn't have to hide the parts of him that are a wounded child. He doesn't have to hide the parts of him that, you know, aren't sure sometimes even about how he feels about us. So if we can learn to have that conversation, right, where it's like, well, how are you feeling and what do you really think, and then own what it brings up in us instead of punishing or lashing out, then that gives a deep sense of intimate freedom, which is I mean, what would you say? I mean, how would men react to that?
Intimate freedom is just like, it's better than the other kind of freedom. Because men have this idea of freedom, and to most men, depending on the level of consciousness, if you're pretty unconscious and you've never experienced real freedom from a woman, then that freedom means like, I can fuck whoever I want. That's the kind of freedom that you feel like would make you feel free, because I'm still worthy, I can still conquer, I can still that. But that's one very low level of freedom. There's another level of freedom which is like, I can conquer one woman's heart and keep her and sustain and grow that passion. That's and then the other one is where I can do that, but I can also feel understood, seen, loved, cherished, admired, and like I'm the king of the world, basically. Like there's nothing else that can compensate that feeling, because at that moment where he feels he can create that in someone, he feels free.
And I think the highest value for us as women to be able to do that is to value connection and honesty and knowing a man as he is and for himself more than we value having a relationship with him. Even though having a relationship is really kind of up there for us women, because we are, you know, our lives revolve around relationship. We're very much the caretakers of relationship, and men are very much the ones that go out into the world and make things happen, at least traditionally speaking again. And so just understanding that we cannot give a man a measure of emotional freedom if we aren't emotionally free, if we aren't self-aware.
So let's talk about how do you actually create this? I mean, let's say that for women who are listening to us right now, saying, well, this sounds amazing, and I would love to give that version of freedom to a man, because that means he's not going to be looking for somebody else. He's going to be more devoted to me.
He's going to be met.
He's going to also want to deepen his mission, because he has what he needs. And he's going to feel happy and amazing and fulfilled. So, as a woman, if you were to tell someone, okay, and you've coached people in doing this, you've done this yourself in your relationships, what would you say that women would have to do or be or share in order for their guy to start feeling seen, valued, loved, cherished in the way that you described it?
There are two steps to this, but I would say the first step, Bern, is as a woman, you have to prioritize your inner world. You have to prioritize who you are on the inside.
What does that mean?
So what that means, okay, so let's start, we were talking earlier about showing up as high value. You show up as high value depending on what you value. So, okay, let's start. So, do you value the way that you feel on a daily basis? Do you spend at some point during the day connecting, you know, not just waking up, getting dressed, going to work, going to have a drink with some friends, coming back, watching TV and going to sleep? If that's your everyday, you know, life, you're actually not having intimacy with yourself. You're not listening into yourself. So I would say, like, the questions of what do you want to experience in relationship? Who are you? What do you want for your life? What are your passions and dreams? What do you absolutely love? So essentially knowing yourself and having passion and intimacy with yourself on a consistent basis is extremely, extremely important. And also, the more that you know yourself, the more you start doing the inner healing work, because we've gone through so many traumas in life, and I'm going to speak specifically to women, that we can have a lot of pent-up rage, which then comes out as control. We can have a lot of pent-up issues of not feeling good enough, which then again comes out as making him not feel good enough, because a man will never be able to be good enough if we aren't, because we're going to try and force him to make us good enough in our stead, and he's going to be forced into a position of overgiving, and that's going to put a lot of pressure. And essentially, we're making men want to make us happy.
And you also, women who do this unconsciously will also, in many ways, let the guy know that he's not enough.
Yeah,
to the point where he'll start believing, not that he's not enough, that might be part of it, but the one is like, she's never going to be happy.
Yeah.
There's no matter what the hell I do, she's not going to be happy. So I have to live this, because otherwise, if I don't, that means I am a slave to this relationship. I'm a slave. I'm not free. It's the opposite of freedom. Right?
And I mean, and that just touches my heart, Bern, because, you know, I've had so many male clients and male friends, and this just comes up as such a burden for them, because when we neglect our inner lives and we neglect finding out how to, you know, be our own self and fill ourselves up, we inevitably force that onto our partners. And I've had so many men tell me, you know, we had everything we would have wanted in the relationship, but she was never happy.
Yeah.
She was never happy. You know, the default for her was
something's missing,
disconnection, right? Happiness, and emptiness. And not the default, wow, I love my life, I'm creating, I'm not just living for a man, I'm not just living for my kids, I'm not just sitting around waiting for someone to rescue me from me stepping up and connecting to my life, but I'm actually going for my life. And that's a huge shift, you know. And I think that's most of us women, you know. We either go from a completely abandoning our lives and being codependent to compensating and being super masculine and independent, but both of those have completely bypassed our inner world and that intimacy and that softness and that femininity with ourselves. Right?
So when you do that part, when you're able to connect to yourself and your inner world, that's the first piece of this. How do you then tie that other part of, is it questions you ask him? Is it the emotional state you're in when you ask? How do you do the second part of?
Okay, so the second thing that I would say is that when you, so the first step is connecting to yourself. The second step is do the inner work to know how much rage, rejection, and fear is driving you. Because when a partner shows up, it's going to bring up all the abandonment issues. It's going to bring up all the moments in your life where you did not receive the love from a male figure that you needed, that we needed. It's going to bring it up. And if you don't address it, and if you don't look at it, and if you don't have tools to really deal with it, you're gonna sabotage your relationship. I have seen this in my life and countless clients' lives. You're gonna find a way to nag him, try to change him, not accept him. You're gonna find a way to put so much pressure on the relationship that it won't be able to hold it, and the relationship will sabotage itself. So I would say number one step is that tune into yourself on a regular basis. What do I want? How do I feel? How did that really make me feel? That argument that I had at work with my boss, that made me feel not good enough. That made me feel ashamed. Am I really not good enough? The more of an intimate conversation you have with yourself, the more, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, the more you're going to create that space for that man. The second step is, wow, I really reacted in fear. Wow, when I went on a date with this guy, I was so obsessed with impressing him that I didn't even see him. I didn't even relax. I had this agenda of being accepted. So that awareness, right?
And there's no way you can create freedom for him if you're not even feeling it yourself, right?
If you're not feeling it.
So you have to feel it yourself first. You have to feel like there's an open heart in you that has enough to give. It's like it's like there's enough in your plate to be able to give to someone, right?
Yeah, and this is the key. You said how do you translate this to
a man? To where now he starts feeling not just your part, but he starts feeling uniquely from you that the freedom that you are able to give him is more than the one he can feel on his own.
And you know what? Freedom comes when we're understood, Bern. It's that simple. And when we move away from judgment to understanding.
Acceptance,
Acceptance. That's the freedom right there. And now I'm going to explain a little bit more about what I mean, but when you start turning yourself inwards and start having that dialogue with yourself where you're like, why do I feel jealous? Why? You're seeking to understand instead of, I shouldn't feel jealous. I'm going to close off, I'm going to shut down that part of myself.
Yeah.
So men in relationships will feel, and I've seen this so many times, and again my heart goes out, they feel shut down. They start to feel shut down. They start to feel shut down sexually, shut down emotionally, like they're never enough, like they can't make you happy. In the measure that you shut down your own life and your own inner world. And so the more understanding that you apply to yourself, the more you kind of ask whys, then when you're having a conversation with him, you start being curious and you're like, what did you feel? Because you're asking yourself those questions, you start asking them, so what did you feel when your boss said that? You know what I mean? And that's a very different question than, are we going on a date? How do you feel about me? You know, what did you feel? And that, your energy is starting to go straight into his heart and it's starting to say, I see your heart. Your heart has a very high value in my life. In fact, it's the most important thing.
I have a question for you, because a lot of women are going to say, well, that's great, I do that with my guy and he basically shuts me down, he's not willing to step in and talk. What would you say to women who are saying, well, he's not expressive, he doesn't want to share his feelings? Why do you think that is, and how can they overcome that?
Because it definitely is the energy that you're approaching it with. If you're approaching it as a form of control, as a form of like, tell me more of who you are, I want to feel more secure, I want to feel more safe, or, I want to feel validated, he's going to be like, what are you asking of me? But if it's just from a very free place and it's just, your energy is curious, but it's happy, it's detached, it's not like, you have to perform for me, you have to be this for me. Like, if you're like, dude, it's okay, like, what are you struggling with? What's going on?
Because there's this other part of the guy. There's this other part of the guy who's gonna feel, well, if I show weakness right now, she's not gonna admire me as much. She's not gonna feel like she can really love me. She's gonna feel insecure. So I have to continue playing this front of being strong so that she doesn't feel insecure.
Yeah.
Right.
That's such a good insight, Bern. And here it goes again. Like, if you have an energy of understanding your weaknesses, for example, one of the things that I tell my clients when they struggle with insecurity and they're like, and they kind of go into shame, like, yeah, I'm insecure. I'm like, cool, what else is new? Like, every human being is insecure. Every single human being that you see is insecure. And so if you can come to the place where you're like, okay, well, a part of me is insecure, a part of me is super secure. And that's just a way of life, and you no longer attach, oh, that's weak, oh, that's not good enough. You don't attach a story to it, but you're just like, no, it's a part of life. Yeah. These are the consequences that it has in my life. This is what I really want. And You see how freeing that is?
So here's what you're saying right now in essence is like, okay, in order for him to feel like you're not judging him, you really have to not be judging him.
Exactly.
It's not a freaking
It's
game.
an energy thing,
It's a reality. You accept him the way
Yeah.
he is, and in that moment, at least, you might freak out a little later, but that moment,
Yeah.
you're really giving him the space
Yeah.
to be anything he wants to be and feel
Yeah.
anything he wants to feel, and you will accept him and love him regardless.
Yeah.
That's the feeling that every human being wants to feel from the moment they were born to the moment they die. Right?
Exactly.
And that's
Exactly.
pure freedom. There's nothing that comes
There's
close
nothing
to that.
even closer. And so the way that you would create space in that situation for him and for yourself is that when you're having a conversation and you ask a question, and let's say you start going into murky waters and you're like, uh-oh, what is he going to say? This is making me nervous.
Yeah.
You communicate that.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, oh wow, you know, wow, can I tell you my experience of it? But not like, you should change and you should do this, but wow, when you express that, it makes me feel insecure. And all of a sudden you've just brought those two spaces into freedom.
So now you're being vulnerable, and now
You're
he
being
understands
vulnerable.
that he also, yeah.
Yeah, and that right there is that union and is that bond of, you know, we can both be human, we can both be real, and at the same time both be showing up in our lives in a powerfully attractive and self-responsible way. It's both of those dynamics.
So basically what you're saying is, okay, the first is the inner freedom, the second one is to give him the acceptance as a result of your own acceptance of
Yes,
yourself, like
yes.
not judging, and
Yes.
the curiosity of asking
Yes.
questions, feeling with your heart,
Yes.
and creating that expansion where when he brings something that's causing insecurity in you, instead of reacting negatively, you start going into your vulnerability so he can
Yeah.
step up and be a man to
Yeah.
basically also connect, descend from his head to his heart and say, how can I connect to my woman's heart
Yeah.
so that we can soothe each other, right?
Yeah. You make it okay for him to be who he is.
And then this whole thing that he's wanted, this breaking of challenges, he's
Yes.
creating this challenge-solving thing in a different way,
Yes.
right? Where he's being himself, where he's getting close to you, and at the same time where he's not in his head. Because
Yes.
freedom is not a head thing. It's like
Yeah.
you might justify it with your head, but it's a feeling that you have in your chest.
Yes,
Right?
yes, absolutely, and that's why it's the most beautiful experience. Now, the only caveat I would say there that is that a woman might think, so what? I just have to accept him, like regardless. No, you can have a conversation with him where you also share how you're feeling, what you're thinking, and what you need in a relationship. You know, without it saying you have to change, you're wrong. You're saying this is what I need. And, you
It's
know,
creating that space.
just creating
It's creating that
space. It's
space for
creating
yourself and for
space
somebody else.
to share exactly how you feel, exactly who you are, and again, ladies, but you yourself have to go off on your own and do the inner work of facing your rage, your rejection, and your fear.
And your shame, right?
Yes, because otherwise you're going to use the conduit of the relationship to dump that all the time, and it's going to be destructive.
Yeah.
You know, if you step away and you go do that work, you connect to a happiness in your life, then you're going to come back and share a vulnerability that he's just never going to get over. I mean, I've seen it over and over.
And then the final touch to this, I guess, would be how you consistently continue showing up for yourself, so that when the
Yes.
connection comes, time for connection, then he's finding a space of aliveness, of
Yes.
vulnerability, of passion, of
Yes. He's finding a full woman
yeah.
instead of a woman that's completely codependently empty.
And then he goes from a space where he has to solve challenges all day long and break free to a point where he can just be free. He doesn't have to create that freedom.
Yes, he can
it's
be
there.
free. He
It's
can
there
be
for
free.
him. Yeah.
And that doesn't mean coming home and everything's positive. You can share your strong feelings and what you need, but it's in freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this. I mean,
Thank you,
I
Brian.
think this will create a lot of space for women to create this kind of shift in their heart and their mind from I want to control situation, I want to create a demanding thing, where if I can
I'm
just
in
open
fear,
up my
I'm
heart,
control- if I
yeah,
can open up
and
my
create
heart.
this freedom that we're talking about, it's game over for this guy.
It's
He will
game
fall
over.
at her feet for the rest of her life,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Well, if you haven't done this already, I want you to click like on this video, subscribe to Gio's channel, and also sign up to free video on the link below.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.